Hello and welcome to this tutorial for Carveco Maker. In this tutorial, we're going to follow on from creating stacked text, and I'm going to create some inlaid text. Okay, so inlaid text is basically where you create a pocket and then you cut a piece of material out that fits within that pocket. And I'll show you how you can do it for this example. So what I need to do first of all is I don't want this to be so deep. So I'm just going to edit this and change it. So I can do that really quickly by double clicking on this Williams depth and then change the finish depth to be 1/4 of an inch. And then select calculate now. So if I delete the simulation and then right click and simulate all the toolpaths, you can see that it's only 1/4 of an inch deep now. So I need to remember that it's 1/4 of an inch. So I can show you how you can create basically a pocket starting at a specific depth. Okay, so let's delete the simulation and get designing. So if I delete that simulation, if ever you get this problem here, this is basically once you delete the simulation, it turns off the visibility of the vectors. So if you click here to toggle vector visibility, and you'll also see all these grey areas, you may see red. Those are just the toolpath previews. So these are controlled by the light bulbs here. So if you click on the light bulbs under toolpaths, that will turn all of them on or off. Okay. Right, so what I can do now is start designing. So if I take a view from the top, and I'm not really too bothered about what layer I do this on, it doesn't really matter. I'll just go back to the default layer for it. So let's create some more text. So let's choose some text. Let's say, I don't know, let's say this one here. Let's see what this looks like. And then click somewhere. And I'm just going to give this a date. So let's say, so this is when these guys got married. Okay. Now, let's say that I wanted to change this. Let's try maybe that one there. Let's say, for instance, let's just mix it up a little bit and then click create. Okay, so press F9, center that in the model. Now, obviously, I don't want to do this here. So what I need to do is move this down. Now, there are two ways to do this. I could either use the arrow keys and just move it down. So use the down arrow key, or I could select it. You can see that it basically lets me move it around freehand. So left clicking and dragging it. Whilst doing that, if I press Alt on the keyboard, it will maintain an angle snap. Okay, and I can move it down. Let's say that that's okay, and that's where I want this date to be. Now, in the previous video, I did mention that sometimes you get errors with the text, and I was going to fix that, but I didn't get any errors with the text. Sometimes you bring in text and there might be vector loops, for instance, or intersections. And I said in the previous video that I was going to fix it, but I didn't because I didn't have any problems. So sometimes you'll have problems, sometimes you won't. It just depends however it's been designed. Now, this particular text there in the bottom here, I can see that on the 9, I've got a vector loop. So see here, I've got this loop. Now, if I were to try to machine this, let's just do a standard area clear. Let's try to machine it. go to toolpaths. Now I'm just going to minimize those, go to toolpaths, do an area clear, and I'm just going to add a small tool. Now I know that this isn't going to work, so let's just enter any depth in here and then calculate. So what's happened is that there are self-intersections in these vectors. Now I know for definite that there's a problem with the 9 here. I can see that it's coming back on itself. Now what happens is this has been designed by some graphic designer who's not really too fussed about the accuracy of this. He's more concerned about how it looks, and that's not very good for us. So sometimes you'll get these problems. So to sort this out, I know that I've got a problem on the 9, but there may be other areas that have a problem. I'll show you how you can spot them. So if I select OK and OK again, and let's just close that. And if I use the vector doctor here, now don't worry about this area here, and I'm not going to worry about coincident points either. All that I'm concerned with is vector intersections. Okay, so just come down to identify problems. Above that is just a selection tool. Okay, so don't worry about that bit. Just come down to identify problems, turn on vector intersections, and then you can select identify. Now, sometimes you'll get the option to remove vector loops. So you can see here that this has got a loop, and it will automatically fix it for you. Now, sometimes this won't work and it won't give you the option to do this. So what you would need to do then is go into it manually, ungroup the text, and then what you would need to do is go into node editing and cut the vector in certain places and then join it back up. Okay, sounds a little bit long-winded, but once you get used to it, it's quite fast. Okay, so if you zoom out, you can see that it's marked by a red circle. So it's showing me where the problem is. And I only have one problem with this text. So if I remove the vector loop, let's zoom in so we can see it. And then I'll just select fix problems. Okay, so it's automatically fixed it for me. Now, I'll be completely honest with you. This won't work. This won't work all of the time. Only sometimes you'll get this option where it's a perfect vector loop that it will fix it. A lot of the time you'll have to go into this and do it manually, as I said. Okay, so that seems to be okay. We'll just test it out before I get into the inlays. So if I close that vector doctor, go back into my area clearance, you can see here that it's red. So that means that it hasn't been calculated, but it has saved it. So if I double click on it, and then let's select the text. Now you can see, if I select it, because it fixed that loop, it's basically exploded or ungrouped all of the vectors. I need to select them all, like so. And what I'll do, I'll just group them together by selecting here. Okay, you can spot group text because they're purple. So now if I calculate, you can see that it calculates it fine. It doesn't give me an error. Okay, so if you ever get those problems where it's telling you that there are vector intersections, that's the cause of the problem. Okay, so let's delete that. I just wanted to show you how to get around that. Okay, so let's do the pocket that I'm going to create some different pieces. Let's say, for instance, I wanted to actually put a piece of, I don't know, let's say plastic in there, okay? And I wanted to drop it into that date. What I need to do first of all is to create the pocket for it to fit into. Okay, so I'll show you how you can do that. So if we go to toolpaths, now normally in the olden days, what you would do, you create an area clearance toolpath like we've been doing. And then what you would need to do is go into here. Let's say this 3 that we have here. So let's draw a circle, which is going to basically represent my tool. So let's change that to diameter, and let's do it. Let's say, let's try 1/8 of an inch. Click create. Oop. So delete that. Select the circle, move that. So if I go there, I'm using an 1/8 of an inch tool. Now, what you can see is that when the tool gets in there, you see this edge here, it's not going to machine any of that area. So what I would need to do is go in with a smaller tool if I wanted to actually get it into this area. So what you would have done in the olden days is create a radius in between there and there. So when you done the part that was fitting in to this piece, it would cut into that fillet, because obviously when you do the pocket, it can't get in to create this sharp corner. So you'd have a mismatch. Now, as you can see, to do that over a whole group of letters would be very easy to miss something. And what the inlay toolpath does, it automatically adds these areas for you. So anywhere where the tool can't get into, it will automatically add a radius for you. So the corresponding part fits in there perfectly. Okay, now the amount of times that I used to do this and do it manually and have a large sort of sign or a large group of text and then forget to do just one fillet and the whole part wouldn't fit, it can be very, very frustrating. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select all of this text and then I'm going to go to create inlay toolpath, which is here. Now, when you select this, you'll be greeted with something called the inlay wizard. Okay, so this is just basically asking you whether you want to do a female or a sort of a pocket. You can either do a hole, so you've got push through lettering, let's say, for instance. You can do a step pocket, or you can do a stepped hole. Okay, now I'm not going to go into the step pocket or stepped hole because they can get a little bit more complicated. I would suggest getting into that a little later on because it creates an offset for you, but it does look really, really good. And it basically provides you with a shoulder so you can butt the male up onto there. So the male, forget about that for the moment. We're going to use completely different material to do that. So I'm going to use some, let's say, 1/8 of an inch piece of acrylic or plastic. Okay, so what I'm going to do is do a pocket. Now, the inlay wizard will stay open behind this. Okay, so just be aware of that. So start depth, what I'm going to do is enter a start depth of, I need to enter the start depth of 0.25, so 1/4 of an inch. The reason being is that all of this material here has already been machined out. Okay, now I won't do it for the time being. I'm just going to enter a finished depth. So the finished depth, I want this to, if I want it to be flush with the piece of material that I'm using to fit inside, then obviously it needs to be the same depth. So let's do this at 1/8 of an inch. Okay, finishing tool. Let's select a tool and let's use, let's say, 1/16 of an inch end mill. Okay, so let's do an offset and let's calculate. Okay, so that's created the tool path, and you can see, let's say on this number 1 here, you can see what's happened is this tool, it can actually go around here and it can create a sharp point. But because we're using the inlay tool path, it automatically knows when I come to do the corresponding part to fit in there, it won't be able to get into that corner, so it wouldn't fit. So it's automatically rounded that corner for me. Okay, so that's basically what it does. You can see it's done the same here on the 9. Okay, so when cutting the outside, the tool can't physically get in there. Okay, so it's automatically sorted that out for me. Right, so let's take a look at this. So if I simulate that, now I've left the tool open because I know that there's a problem with it. So you got the John and Deb, got the machining to depth, got the profile, which I'm not too fussed about at the moment, but this female pocket, this is what I want to see. So this is the inlay. So if I use my simulation control bar so I can see this and press play. So you can see it's machining it, but what it's doing is it's machining fresh air. The reason being is that the start depth is set to 0. Okay, and it's coming down 1/8 of an inch. Now this material's already been blasted away, so it's not actually machining anything. So what we need to do is, whilst this is still on there, it doesn't really matter, is change the start depth. So let's change the start depth to be 1/4 of an inch. Now, if you happen to just forget what the start depth is or how deep this has been machined, if you hover your mouse over the job, if you take a look down the bottom right hand side, you can see that there are X, Y and Z coordinates, and you can see them moving as I hover over the job. If I hover over a flat part, you can see that Z coordinate gives me the size. So you can see that it's negative 0.25. Okay, so that's the start depth. Now this doesn't need to be a negative, this is a positive because it's always going down. Okay, so 0.25 finish depth, I need to add that on to the start depth. So the finish depth is going to be 0.375. Okay, and then calculate. So now if I simulate this, go to the simulation control bar and press play, you can see that it's machining this text in. Okay, so that looks okay, and you can see that it's starting at the 1/4 of an inch depth and then it's going down by 1/8 of an inch. Now, what I want to do is change the size of this. So what you would have done also back in the day is you would have offset the vectors. This is because you couldn't have something that was size on size. So if you were fitting something into here and it was size on size, you wouldn't have a chance of it actually fitting because it just wouldn't fit. So you'd have to make the vectors larger, or on the mating part, you would have to make the vectors smaller so it fit in there basically. Okay, so if I go to 2D view, and this is pretty much the only time that I really use the 2D view whilst doing toolpaths, to be completely honest with you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this toolpath fans out a little bit and it goes a bit larger. Now, the way that we can do that is go to allowance. So if I go to allowance, make this a bit larger. So if you enter a positive figure, it will make the pocket larger. If you enter a negative figure, it will make it smaller. So if I do 0.02, so 20 thou or 1/2 millimeter, and select calculate now, you can see that it's made it larger. Okay, so this is going to be 20 thou or 1/2 millimeter larger than the part that I'm going to fit in here. Okay, so that is pretty much done. So if I close that, and let's rename that to be, let's say pocket inlay, and then let's delete the simulation, and then let's simulate all the toolpaths again, just to make sure that it's okay. Okay, so that looks quite good. So what I would do now is send this to the CNC machine. Now the pocket inlay, I probably want to move that above profile so it doesn't machine it after cutting the part out. So let's just, you can use these arrow keys. What I normally tend to do is just grab that, left click on it, and then just move it above profile. Okay. So save the toolpath, send it to the CNC machine, machine it, and then what we're going to do now is we're going to create the male part for this. So the part that fits into this pocket. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to use this text in a pretty much a completely new model. So what we can do is you can leave these on there if you like. It's entirely up to you. What you need to check is what tool you're using. So you need to make a note of this tool. If you use a different tool, you're going to get a different radius and it's not going to fit. Okay, so very important, make a note of what that tool is. So we're using a 1/16 of an inch tool. And what I can do is just delete these tool paths, select there, delete just like so. Okay, delete the simulation, turn on the vectors, and I don't need any of these vectors to be completely honest with you. I just need that. Okay, now I can do whatever I like with this. I could put that down the bottom corner like so. Let's take a plan view of this. So this is just going to be cut out. Okay, now if I wanted to, if I were using Maker Plus, then I could nest this if I wanted to, or I could just ungroup it and move it around. Okay. Now, to cut this out, what you would do is go to Toolpaths, and we need to change the material. Okay. So even though we haven't created a new model, we have changed the material. Now you could either just change the material, or you could just literally select that and export the vectors out and then just bring them back into a new model. It's entirely up to you, however you want to work. Okay, so let me set up my material, and this is going to be 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so it fits flush on the top of the previous example. Select OK, and that has set up my material. So if I rotate around, you can see I've got this 1/8 of an inch material. Okay, so to machine this, go back to create inlay toolpath, and this time I'm going to do a straight male. Okay, start depth is 0, finish depth is going to be my material thickness. So it's 1/8 of an inch. Now I don't need to worry about the allowance because I added that onto the pocket and made the pocket larger. If I did forget to do the pocket, what I could do is just put a negative amount here, and then it would just take it off. Select tool. Importantly, this needs to be the same tool. Okay. And then what I can do is calculate now. Okay, so what's happening is if I zoom in, you can see how it's rounding these edges. So in the pocket, the tool couldn't actually get into there. So it's automatically rounding the edges and it will fit in perfectly. Okay. So if I simulate this, right click, simulation control bar, let's rotate it around, select play. You can see that it's cutting the part out. Now, obviously, these are quite small, and unless you're taping these down or gluing them, they're going to move. Okay, So what we're going to do is add something called bridges. I'm only going to touch onto this. Basically, bridges leave a piece of material on there, so it's still connected to the main part of the material. Okay, so if I delete that simulation now, turn that on, and let's take another view from the top, and we're going to add bridges. Okay, constant number, let's just say that I want 2. Okay, I just want it to be connected to it. And let's say I do this, I don't know, let's say quite small, 40 thou, thickness, let's say 40 thou again. Okay, so it's not really that big. Now, what I like to use is normally 2D bridges, because in the past when I've used 3D bridges, especially if I set to the table or the bed, if that isn't set up perfectly correctly, then what you do is, if it machines a bit deeper, it's going to take off the bottom of that 3D bridge. So I like to normally use 2D bridges, to be completely honest with you. So 2D bridges, and I'm not going to add one on the start point. I'm just going to select add. Okay, now sometimes this can place them in some weird areas. Okay, it doesn't look too bad at the moment, to be completely honest with you. I'm just going to just open that up a little bit, and what I'm going to do is maybe move the one at the bottom of this 7 and take this away from the corner of the 1. The reason being is that I'm going to have to sand this afterwards, so it leaves a piece of material on there, and I'm going to have to sand it later. It's going to be a bit of a pain if it's close to one of the corners. So let's edit the bridges, and what this does, it gives you these blue markers. Now, the good thing about this is that this applies to a vector, so you can add these bridges to the vector, and then you could create copies afterwards, and it would still be on this vector. So when you come to machine it, it would know exactly where the bridges were. Okay, so let's grab that blue one there, and I'll just move that down to there. Grab that one, move that down to there. Let's take a look at the one over here. Now, what I can do is delete them and add them as well. So if I right click, you can see that I've got insert bridge and I've got delete bridge. So if I delete bridge, you also see that there's a D and an I. So these are shortcuts. So delete the bridge. Let's select I, and it will insert a bridge. You can also insert a bridge, delete a bridge. Okay, so once you get the hang of it, it's quite a fast reader. Okay, so that looks okay, so let's calculate it. So if I use my simulation control bar again, select play, now what you can see, it's leaving a little amount of the material. So this is going to stop it from moving. Okay, now it will mean that I will need to sand these and do some finishing at the end, but at least these parts won't be flying around off the machine and hitting the cutter and causing more damage to the part than me actually taking the time to sand them. Okay, so sometimes there are parts that are just too small to machine. You need to keep it attached to the original piece of material. Okay, so what we need to do then is send that to the CNC machine, machine it, finish it up by sanding or however you would do that, and then you can fit the parts into the original piece that we created. And they should fit perfect and fit all flush and nice.